How's it going, Nolan?
Good, Joseph. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Now, how do you actually pronounce your last name? I've been calling you Nolan G on social media because one, I can't spell your last name, and I didn't know how to pronounce it. How do you pronounce your last name?
It's pronounced Gunther.
Gunther. Okay. So today I have Nolan Gunther from the Every Podcast I Love Is Dead. He covers rock, metal, and punk news. Correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you for having me. You actually had me on your podcast was last week.
Yeah, we had that on the podcast last week, the my show's first interview, and I've had nothing but great feedback about it. Everybody thinks that you sounded super interesting and you gave a great interview, and I think we had a really good, well, almost a 40-minute conversation on there. So
Yeah, definitely. It came off sounding so professional when I listened to it. I was like, man, he makes me sound good because you're actually my first guest as well. So I'm very excited to have you and kind of see where we're gonna go with this.
be
As
each other's first time. That's nice.
right, that's why I'm gonna hold you so near and dear to my heart through the entire podcast journey that I take. So yeah, for my listeners, they've been hearing me ramble for 21 episodes now, just by myself, and it's definitely a different atmosphere. I'm a lot more calm and a lot more like just kind of talking in the dark. So it's nice to finally have somebody on. So I do thank you for coming on. And I'm trying to figure out how we're gonna do all this, and like I discussed before we recorded, I'm still trying to figure out how the heart of it's gonna be when I have guests come on and stuff. So I'm hoping I get better as we go along. But the way I wanted to kind of run it was, we kind of discuss kind of loosely about a topic that we were going to discuss. And one of the things that I've been talking about on this podcast in particular is entrepreneurship. It's one thing that I've been kind of focusing a lot on in this podcast, and just meeting other podcasters and meeting other entrepreneurs in different businesses. It's very interesting to kind of hear their story and hear their perspective and kind of the mountains that they have to climb, because everybody has a different journey. And I've always been interested in hearing what people have to say. So with that being said, what got you into like doing the whole podcast? I know you have a radio show too, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's been a weird journey to get to the podcast to where we are today. And it all really started in my college days. I went to college for radio broadcasting. When you think about what you want to be when you grow up, I mean, people want to be police officers, people want to be doctors, astronauts, whatever it might be. And I had really gravitated towards entertainment, and I love drama. I've always been a huge music junkie and consume music in as many forms as possible. So I after high school decided I'd go to college and go into radio broadcasting and not to toot my own horn, but I've got the voice and that sort of thing. Definitely more of a face for radio. I don't make it so well on the video stuff, but on the voice stuff, I tend to blend in pretty well. So go to school for that, made my connections and did stuff throughout college. But, one thing that you realize pretty quick about radio is that there is zero money in radio. So as everybody kind of went off and they were still doing their overnight gigs and remote gigs and that sort of thing, I wanted to get a job and make some money. So I started my career. And at that time, it was kind of just a job to get me through in telecommunications. And 14 years later and a wife and two kids later, you realize that the dream of being in radio or entertainment has maybe gotten away from you quickly. And I think the thing about this pandemic that a lot of people are probably realizing is that you get way more time with yourself than you ever thought that you'd be comfortable with. You're going through thoughts, you're overthinking things, you're thinking about life, how you got to the point that you're in, what are some of the things that you wish that you could do. And something else that's really kind of awesome about the pandemic is it's broken down a lot of walls in terms of the ability to work remotely. So I ended up actually leaving my job of 14 years last June, starting at a new company, meeting my team virtually, only meeting my boss a handful of times, and, working at this job now, coming up on, 9-10 months, all virtually.
Oh, wow.
That's a big step. And when you take a big step in your life like that, you realize like maybe it's not as scary as you initially thought to put some change in there. But at the end of the day, when you sit down and you think about like, am I getting enough out of this? Am I getting at the end of the day, that fulfillment? And, you work the job to pay the bills, but then you've got all the hobbies, and that's the stuff that really makes you feel fulfilled. And I had always thought about doing a podcast, and I've talked to friends about doing a podcast, and everybody always wants to do that. And, for a while there, in the early 2000s, I guess 2006, 2007, around that area. Some friends and I, it's kind of the dawn of YouTube. We're doing videos and video game reviews and some fun video stuff. And, we had a show back then called A Button. So kind of a take on the Canadian thing. I'm a Canadian. And
you caught that gaming wave right when it was
caught the gaming
up.
Wave. Yeah, we were doing LAN parties and videos and video game reviews, and then that went away. And we came back and we did something called Midnight Launch, and we were doing video game reviews then and trying to ride that wave. But it was always reliant on somebody else. And as you have a family, as you have kids, as you have a job, as you have all those bills, it's really hard to get 3 or 4 people together to do that kind of thing. So as I was thinking about doing a podcast, you think about, well, what are the things that I love? Well, I love music. So that just makes sense. So you kind of gravitate towards that. And it's like, well, I'm going to make this a one-man show and just do it start to finish until I can start booking some guests and making it really interesting. And thankfully, it hasn't taken too long. I'm not as far into my podcast as you are. I've only got 9 episodes up there right now. But
I believe we started around the same time, though, correct? Like you started in 2020, late 2020, right?
Yeah. And I think you're probably just more ambitious than me, because let it wait a week. We'll let it burn. Sometimes I'll get the podcast done early and then just kind of sit on it and think, well, my fans, they want this. But then you realize maybe there's not as many fans as you think.
It's that fake it till you make it mentality, though.
That's the thing, right?
You got to tell yourself. Everybody. Yep. That's what helps keep people. For me, I know that's what keeps me motivated. Is it's like, hey, man, even though it may just be 1 or 2 people listening, those people are waiting, and I want to stay with my schedule and be taken seriously. So
that's the thing, right? And I've read somewhere, if you can make it 6 months doing anything, you're going to know whether it's going to be successful or not, but stick to it for 6 months. That's kind of the key. I think a lot of us, start new jobs that way. And after 6 months, we still hate our lives, but the paycheck's good. So we stay there. Right.
Oh yeah.
But, hobbies are something different.
That's the job security. And it's funny that like you circled back around to that, because you mentioned something earlier. I didn't want to cut you off, but you mentioned something that definitely kind of struck me and is interesting in the sense that you were mentioning the pandemic and how, people are getting into their passions. We're forced to kind of do it because we're bored and we're getting tired of staring at the wall. There's only so much Netflix that you can watch. There's only so much YouTube that you can look at before you're like, you know what? I think I can do that. But I feel that job security. And I saw this at a young age when I was in my 20s, working overnight jobs. I worked in grocery stores pretty much my entire 20s. And, I would look at these people in their mid 30s, which now I'm in my 30s, but I would look at people around my age and I'm like, I don't want to become that. These people look jaded. They have a very negative outlook on life. It's because they're not happy. It's because they're working a job that they're not advancing in. They're basically making just enough money to survive. And I don't want to do that. And I think a lot of people have that mentality. A lot of people are unhappy because they're not happy with where they're at. And so the pandemic, if we try to look for the silver lining in the chaos that is the pandemic, I think that's one of the positive things that we can pull from that, is that it's allowed people who had the drive but didn't have the time to now they have the drive and now they have the time. They can pursue their passions. My mom's a perfect example. She started getting into, creating reeves and stuff and doing artsy type things. And I told her, the way technology is now, man, if you make a product that you're proud of and it's quality, I can make you a website and you can sell the stuff online and you can start making money off of something that you enjoy doing. And
yeah, that's a huge part of it. I think when you and I were just chatting back and forth yesterday, just talking about like the different means that we use to record our podcasts and stuff. And I think back to, I grew up playing in bands and making music and then trying to do the video stuff. And it was always so cumbersome because, well, if you were in a band, you needed to book studio space, you needed to get in there, lay down the tracks. It was a very manual process. When I went to college, we were still using, LPs, CD carts. We had a reel machine that we would use. We had to splice our music that way, not because that was an industry standard, but because those things still existed out there. Nowadays, I mean, with YouTube, with a web camera, with a $200 microphone, you can create a product. Twitch is a good example. There's a ton of people using Twitch right now to stream video games. You're going to be playing the games anyways. Why not monetize it? Why not get some people in the door? And it's so much easier to be a content creator right now. But yeah, if you've got art, if you've got music, if you've got a message that you can get out there, there's never been an easier way to do it. And because there's also a lot of people like us stuck at home who are bored, we're also consuming that media at a faster rate.
Yeah, and it's funny because you mentioned the video game thing, like Twitch. Man, if I would have had Twitch back when I was playing like Call of Duty 4 and Battlefield 3 back in those days, there was ways to do it. I didn't know how to do it then, and it wasn't the easiest way to do things. And I was trolling with the best of them. I could have been a huge YouTube creator at that time. I missed that boat because I didn't know how to run the technology. So now with technology being the way it is, your average Joe can just literally do a little bit of research on YouTube, and they can set up their own studios, and they can start going. A lot of them, even I'm part of a couple of podcast groups on Facebook. Some of them are just using their cell phone, like they're just recording on their cell phone. They're by these little $100 mics that they can plug into the cell phone, and they get great quality. It's amazing where technology's gone.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, when you used to, if you were filming a video or something like that, and you got the big camera with the cassette tapes in it, and some of them came in a briefcase with a handle on it, and that's how you had to film. And now your cell phone has a 290 megapixel camera on it or whatever it has, and you're taking 4K video in 60 frames per second.
I feel like such an old man with those phones, dude. I literally buy the cheapest phone. Like, I haven't had a cell phone in a year. I haven't told many people this. My close friends know. But from high school all the way until just last year, I literally had the exact same phone number. So people who knew me from way back in the day, they know my number purely based on the fact that it just got grandfathered in with me. I had it so long. Getting rid of it. But every time I've gone into a phone store, I'm that old. I'm just an old soul, man. I'm like, give me the cheapest phone.
And they're like,
I want the free one.
Yeah,
they're just like, hey man, this one has this kind of camera, this, and I'm not tech savvy, so I don't know what you're saying. You're just throwing words at me. Like, at this point, I feel like you're insulting me because I don't know what the hell you're saying. So it's like, I just want the cheapest phone, and like, I have a cell phone now. It doesn't work. I literally use it just to communicate through Facebook, through email, and stuff like that. Like, it's on me, and the only time it works is if I'm in a place that has free Wi-Fi.
It's such a crazy progression, In high school, I got my first cell phone, and it was a Motorola. It looked like a peanut, and literally all it did was call people, and it had a couple games on it, and that sort of thing. And really, in a 20-year span, 15-year span, I don't want to age myself too much. Now there's nothing that I can't do on my phone that I can do on my computer or something like that. I can even hook my phone up to a monitor, and all of a sudden I've got an operating system, and I can just do it that way. So there's been times where I need to record something for the podcast, and the kids have been at home doing schoolwork or whatever. They've got the computer, so I just take my phone, hook up my mic, and I can record it that way. And it's the same experience, a lot smaller screen, I'll tell you, but the same experience. So it's amazing where we're at with technology. I'm a bit of a junkie for technology, but I'm also cautious with it because I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. And, for yourself as a recording artist, I know that there's a lot to be said for the integrity of, what are you recording digitally? Are you recording using analog? Are you using a mix of styles? What kind of microphone do you have? And really, we talked about it, I think, on my podcast. Like, the end product is really what you're trying to achieve. And if it sounds good, that's all that matters. But, there's a lot of audiophiles out there who are going to argue until they're blue in the face that the best way to record is, an analog measure. And I think there's something to be said that moving forward in time, that we don't lose that history. We don't lose that piece where, you're queuing up a reel-to-reel machine, or you're, trying to find the right note on that record and listen to it just with the needle or something like that. But embrace this stuff. It's great.
Yeah, and that's the thing with like those type of elites. What I think a lot of them don't understand is the majority of the people who are doing it the way like I'm doing it, I use Superior Drummer, I use Line 6 Helix Native for all my guitar stuff. I do it because, again, the ease and the convenience of it. If I could go into an actual studio and do the reel to reel, dude, I would love to do that. Like, I'm not against it. It's just at the same time, I got to do what's convenient, what's easy, and what's going to allow me to be the most productive, the best. And if I can pump, and like I said, the way I'm running my music, I'm trying to pump stuff out like once or twice a month. So I want to be able to get in, get out, and knock out great products. And I just like that technology has caught up to allow me to do that. But it's funny that it kind of leads into what the second question that I had for you, which was, you doing the podcast. We're both fairly new at it. We're both, doing that climb right now. We're both grinding it out, being entrepreneurs and stuff like that. There comes a time when your audience starts to grow. You start to have more influence, and especially with you're in a niche market. Like your niche is, rock, metal, punk news, which it's a great niche. And like I said, I love the way your format is and the way you do, how you cover the news. And again, you have, like you said, you have a great radio voice. So when I heard your podcast, it was an immediate subscribe to it, because it has all the elements that I was looking for as a fan. So with that being said, as you grow, as you get more popular, there comes a time when you come to a crossroads. You have to make a choice. Am I at a place now where I can make this a full-time gig and I can financially be stable by doing this 100%? Or do I stay down the road of trying to not be labeled as a quote-unquote sellout and stick with doing jobs and not fall into the whole sellout realm? So ultimately my question to you is, what is your definition of a sellout, and how do you feel about how easily that term gets thrown around?
It's so funny, because if you ask 16-year-old me that question, I'd have a totally different answer than I would today, because it's a unique concept, right? And really, when I use family a lot, right? You and I both have family, and it's one of those things where whatever I do is for my family. I've got my hobbies, I do my stuff for me, but I wouldn't be working the job that I have if I didn't, have to pay a mortgage or send kids to school, make sure that they're fed. I'd be perfectly happy on, an inflatable couch with, the crappy clothes that I had on, as long as, I have my
living off ramen.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like those high school, college dreams. But now if you can make money doing something and it's something that you love, man, go for it. That's your dream. I think it was after episode 2 that I had recorded, and I instantly sat back and thought to myself, like, have I painted myself into a corner? I love metal. I love rock. I love punk rock. I love this genre, but I don't have a lot of friends that are into this stuff anymore. When I was in high school, I surrounded myself with all the metalheads, all the punk kids. We were at shows every weekend. We were playing in bands. We were, trying to make it. We were helping our friends try to make it. And then it would have been different. But now I'm like, all my friends are in their mid 30s, early 40s. I've got friends who are even older than that, and they're not into the punk rock scene. They listen to the show because they support me. Sometimes there'll be something in there that they really like. They really like the interviews, which is great. So I wondered, have I painted myself into a corner? Ultimately, I haven't. I think I'm in a really good spot. I'm getting guests on the show, but I'm not being too picky about my guests. You're the closest in genre that I would be looking for when I had you on the show. This past week, we had, a punk rock hip hop guy on there, a bit pop punk, different than what I would have listened to in high school. But man, dig his tunes, really good. I'm interviewing a DJ for the next one, and then I've even got a folk artist coming on the show, because I think it's so important to think about all the genres that influence what it is that you love. There's a ton of music that we listen to that Sure, yeah, they went, Metallica, Slayer, Pantera, Anthrax. They went off all the big guys, and that was their main influence. But there's going to be stuff that comes into there. Whether it's a Run DMC or an NWA kind of influence that came into there, or even a weird trend in metal recently has been a lot of the country influence that's kind of crossed over, and you get some weird collaborations between those guys, but there's a ton of influence that's there. So to me, back in my high school days, that would have been selling out, man. Like, you're playing country music, or you've got a country artist on your show, or there's pop punk. Like, why the Fall Out Boy, Good Charlotte kind of era? Like, why?
You're like, where's the heavy?
Right? Like, I want heavy, I want fast. I
Yeah.
wanted people slamming into each other, and blood and bruises. Now, if it sounds good, if it rocks, if you've got talent, if you're doing something for yourself, I think that's the coolest thing that you can do, man. Like, it is so metal to have that mentality of like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to spread my art to the world. I'm going to, create my content and do what I love to do, regardless of what the genre is. And regardless of whether you love it or not, this is what I love. This is what I'm into. So I think that's a long, drawn out answer to sort of the concept of sellout. I think when it comes to the show, and I do have a radio show as well. I'm on a radio station, KKNH Radio. And it's a commercial radio station. We have commercials on there. It is a not-for-profit radio station.
Oh, cool.
For Natalia's House, which is a cool not-for-profit charity. They do just a ton of work around the world for underprivileged children. So we promote that a lot on the radio station, but you have to keep the lights on. So there are some advertisements on there. There's some music on there that I would never play in my life. I've started to sneak in some heavy rock at the end of my show and have an hour dedicated to, getting some Korn on the air, some Slipknot. We'll play Tool, Pantera, the adjacent stuff. I'd love to get Lamb of God on there, maybe some Kill Switch.
Right now, you're on the tip of the iceberg, just the radio friendly stuff.
Yeah, I remember I played Slayer on there, and I was like, this is the moment my parents stopped listening, because I've got Slayer playing on there. But I was like, this is awesome. I'm on a radio station and I'm playing Slayer. And then, you go back to regular format and you've got your Dire Straits and Eagles and Kiss and that sort of thing. So it's all great. I enjoy all of it, but certainly something I lean more towards. And I think if I can remember where I came from, how I got here, the things that I love, and how it's helped build who I am today, I don't really think that sellout is even a term anymore, at least not in my vocabulary and for what I want to do. If somebody wants to pay me to come on a show, or to read an advert, or to be, on their radio station, I welcome that, because this is the stuff I love.
See, and I think that's where, as I was growing up, my definition for it started to kind of change too. Because again, I feel like the term sellout is the people who use the term sellout are the same people who use the word poser. And I feel like a lot of people who use the word posers are not confident in themselves to begin with. So they just have to constantly hate on what others are doing, because, I mean, the whole point is, like, if you look at punk rock, the whole mindset of punk rock is, fuck the establishment, fuck everybody, and what people think about me. I'm unique, I'm an individual, and I'm going to be me whether you like it or not. So I always found it funny that, especially when I was going through my little punk phase in high school, people who didn't like me would call me a poser. And I'm like, well, you're kind of going against your own ideology. I don't really care what you think. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm happy being who I am, yet you want to hate on that. That goes against the whole mystic of what you're trying to create. And it's kind of the same thing with sellouts. I think people who use the term sellout are people who lack any type of creativity and a motivation to create on their own. If you look at any content creator, it's funny because a lot of content creators, some of them still kind of are afraid of that because they don't want to be labeled as a sellout. But at the end of the day, you, like you said, you have to do what's going to keep the lights on. And why not get paid for something that you like to do? That's the whole point of being an entrepreneur. When you start out, you're working for free. You're putting in a lot of man hours and you're not getting paid for it. So when somebody recognizes that and is willing to partner with you and team up with you, why not go for it? Now, where I draw the line, me personally, is, it's funny because I was thinking about this in the shower, but where I draw the line personally about it is, if let's say you get to a position where you can, let's say you monetize your podcast and you start getting ad revenue, and companies start coming at you with ads. Well, for me personally, there's still integrity that I hold, and I'm sure you're the same. Talking to you, we seem to agree on a lot of things, and I can confidently say I think you would agree with that. There's still integrity, so you're not going to push a product that you don't either use yourself or believe in, because again, you have integrity in what you do. And you know that your words matter. And if you have a fan base, you don't want to push garbage on them, because then it tarnishes your relationship with those said people. It tarnishes your credibility. So that, for me, that would be a term that I would use to call someone a sellout. If they get to this popularity and then now all they see is dollar signs and that's all they care about, and then they just start taking any and every opportunity that's given to them. And if you actually get to know them and like, hey man, do you actually use that product? Well, no. Well, then why do you back it? Well, because they pay me. Okay, then that, to me, that's a sellout.
That's a great point. No, I think you're absolutely right. Like, you have to have integrity and do what you feel is right. And you don't want to be pushing a garbage product or a garbage service or something to people that you know isn't going to make their lives better, right? And we've had that every once in a while. We'll play a commercial and I kind of go, ugh, okay, sure. If that's what keeps the lights on, then that, it is what it is. Another example of this, and I don't want this to go too far off the rails because this week has been an interesting week for him, but on my Sunday show, I like to play a Marilyn Manson song. I love Marilyn Manson. I grew up on the music of Marilyn Manson. I appreciate the art of Marilyn Manson. This week has obviously not been a great week for Marilyn Manson. And, whatever happens there, and that's going to be something that's dealt with. Hopefully, we follow the course of, being proven guilty if there is guilt to be associated there. But as I was putting together my show list for Sunday, I was like, I think I'm going to leave Manson off of there this Sunday until we get, things kind of cooled down. I think it's the same with, when everything was happening with the Michael Jackson stuff and when that documentary came out.
Oh yeah, I think it's with everybody. I think it with all celebrities. Like there's this weird culture that has come about where people, it used to be innocent until proven guilty, and now it's guilty until proven innocent. It's gone ass backwards. So I'm kind of with you. Like, yeah, let's see how the cards.
Yeah, but maybe like this week we'll just wait and we'll see how that plays out. Because I wouldn't want to be that person who's like, oh, well, he was pushing all this Marilyn Manson on us. Meanwhile, he is this, that, and the other thing. I obviously, if any of the allegations are true, I definitely, don't stand for that at all. But it's tough, and you can support somebody, or you can support something, or you can enjoy something for so long, and then all of a sudden, what you thought, what you believed, is all of a sudden ripped away from you, and you kind of have to reevaluate that sort of stuff and go, ooh, all right, something different to turn the focus away from that, or what have you.
And it's funny you mentioned that too, because that's one of those things that I battle with myself as well. And I've being an artist myself now, I don't try to put myself in situations where I could be in that type of trouble. I'm not that type of individual. We all have our own moral compass that we basically go by, and some people's compasses are a little off. But that's another thing where for me, it's an interesting conversation to have with people when people, a artist or an actor or somebody that you really like and you like the art that they do, they get caught up in something that you don't agree with. If you still like that, me as a person, I don't judge that person if they still like that art. Now, there may be an artist that I like their music and they do something and I don't agree with it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to stop listening to their music. That their music, I think we need to learn to separate the two. Because if I've had that before too, and this is a weird one, but like, let's use Chick-fil-A, for example. I like their chicken. I didn't get caught up in all that, political stuff that they were in. I didn't care, because at the end of the day, I don't care who's running the business. I go there because of the product that they sell. And I got a lot of heat for that from some of my friends. And then I got other friends that like agree with me. They're like, yeah, who cares? Like, they do what they want to do. Like, I like their chicken. Like, I'm not paying. And because people will try to guilt you and be like, well, when you give them their money, you're paying into their cause. And it's like, no, I'm giving them my money for their chicken. What they decide to do with it is on theirs. Now, again, we don't have to agree with it, but I don't like being held on the fire with that same person, because it's like, just because I give him money for his product doesn't mean that I necessarily align myself with his ideologies.
It's so hard to pick and choose, right? Because I mean, Disney is a good example. And, I think we all know some of the rumors about Disney and some of the things that have gone on in their camp. But at the end of the day, me and my kids, we love Disneyland. We love Disney movies. We are obsessed with Star Wars and watch The Mandalorian every time it comes out on Disney Plus. So sure, I'm giving them my money. I may not necessarily believe with their corporate practice and how they go about their business, but there is some corporate responsibility that's there. And I think there is a certain line that needs to be drawn in the sand. If I found out tomorrow that a particular clothing brand I loved was actually funded by Jeffrey Epstein, I'd probably go, all right, maybe I'm going to try something a little bit different, because I don't really want to align with that. But man, it gets so tough, especially when it comes to art. And I'll use two examples. So there was a band called The Lost Prophets. They were a UK band, pretty big around the 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
Their lead singer ended up going to jail for just a boatload of child porn. I have not listened to a Lost Prophet song since that day. The rest of the band, they probably had nothing to do with this, but I cannot listen to them. Another example is that,
and I think that comes from. So I haven't mean to interrupt you, but I think
that's okay.
I think that comes from again, there's nothing wrong with that. Like I ultimately, like, my point was, like, people should be free to have their own personal choice and not be judged on it. And coming from where you're coming from, I've never heard the band, but I kind of agree with you in that aspect, because again, we're both fathers. So it's something that touches us personally. Now, would I go out of my way to sit there and drag their name through mud? And if somebody was a fan of them, be like, why do you listen to them? Don't you know that? That's where I draw the line. Like, that's where I think it kind of gets a little out of hand. If people want to listen to stuff, that's great. Even if you don't care, that's awesome. But yeah, the judging is something that I think is just getting way out of hand, and it's gotten on my nerves. I just did an episode right before we got on where I basically I didn't want to talk politics, but I kind of go into that realm just a little bit, just because I'm tired of seeing people being so mean to each other, just because of what people believe, and there's that trying to find that common ground and agreeing, and just being okay with people having different opinions, even if you don't agree with it. It's a lost art, and it's really frustrating.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and again, not to get political or anything like that, but in Canada, it seems that there's a little bit more freedom to be on one end or the other, or kind of land in the middle. And maybe it's a sit back and watch sort of approach, but you do see a bit of divisiveness in America, and more than I've ever seen in my adult life, in a country that I love so much. And it's tough to have an opinion nowadays. And I think we talked as well on my show just about, it's tough to be in the middle. It's hard for you to say, hey, I agree with this policy, but I don't agree with this one, because you're going to get labeled one way or the other. I had a bit of an argument with a friend earlier just about sort of our views on how the Canadian Prime Minister has gone about handling the pandemic and vaccine acquisitions and that sort of thing. And it got misconstrued, but I think at the end of the day, we can still look at that and go, okay, I'm on this end of the spectrum, you're on that end of the spectrum. We maybe don't agree on this, but we can still have a debate about that and be friends at the end of the day. Like, it's not going to tear our friendship apart over that. And I hope that the world as a whole doesn't get to a point where you can only be in this camp or only be in that camp, because we need to have that debate. We need to have that space where it's okay to disagree. But at the end of the day, I respect you for who you are, for having your opinions, for having your beliefs. And even though they're different than mine, you're still entitled to those. And I think that's a piece that's been missed quite a bit over the last several years, but especially in recent history, is just, we can't have that debate anymore. It doesn't seem to go well.
I think a lot of it too comes from the lack of, because I did an episode called Tribal Mentality. It's a monologue, and I think tribal mentality is rampant in our society, not just in America, but just along in the entire world. And I think a lot of it it comes from people not being confident with themselves, not actually loving themselves, not knowing who they are. So they're constantly looking to fit in somewhere. And you see it across all types of things. I mean, even in the metal community itself, even though I love the metal community, I'm part of the metal community. I mean, they eat their own as well. And a lot of times it's just people who want to just be a part of something, but then they take it to an extreme. And then there comes a time in that group where it fractures and it becomes this elite squad of doorkeepers and gatekeepers. And you have that in every type of group. I mean, even down to something as funny as like Ford versus Chevy. You know, somebody they have to claim something. You can never just be in the middle. And I think that's a huge problem. And that's why I try not to subscribe to tribal mentality. From a politic standpoint, the problem is that, like you were saying, it's hard to be in the middle in politics right now, because you have far left and far right both basically saying you need to pick a side. You're not allowed to agree with us and also agree with them. And it really muddies the water. It makes it very stressful for free thinkers, because you can see hypocrisy on both sides and you're not allowed to say anything.
Because if you say...
Yeah, those two groups tend to be the smaller part of the population, you know, your extreme left and your extreme right, but they're also the loudest.
Exactly.
And that's where that middle group, maybe I want to say 80% of people who go, okay, I believe some of this, I believe some of that, they don't want to speak out on that because they're silenced by that 10% on either side saying, no, you have to think this way or you have to think that way. And I think that's where it becomes really difficult to navigate the water.
And the thing that for me is the most stressful part is that when you do speak out and you do try to find that common ground, terms get thrown around so loosely nowadays. And what's funny is I'm not going to label either side, but what I will say is the same people that cry unity are also the same people who are quick to bash and try to destroy the lives of people who they don't agree with. And that's frustrating, because again, it's if I'm just standing on the sidelines and I'm watching both sides bicker, and I'm able to find hypocrisies on both ends, and I point it out, now I'm getting labeled. Which again, that's those same group of people say, "Hey, words matter." Okay, well then, why is it so easy for you if words matter that you're gonna throw a term like "you're racist"? If you don't agree with me, you're racist. If you don't agree with me, you're a bigot. If you don't agree with me, you're a fascist. Like, well, no, you know nothing of me. And you're going based off of just the fact that I'm pointing out something that I notice a little flaw in a little bit of your ideology, and all of a sudden I'm the bad guy. Like, and again, I think a lot of those extremists come from a lack of not knowing who they are, not loving themselves, and looking to be a part of something. And some of them may fall into those just because they fear being ridiculed. They fear standing their ground and being confident in the way that they think. So they're just like, you know what, I'll roll over. Because I'd rather be part of the group that is hating and that mob rule than have to face that and not know what to do.
It's like if you have an opinion, you have to believe in it so wholeheartedly that even when it's wrong, you have to continue to promote that opinion and that as fact, so that you can prove to people that you were so confident in that opinion, in that belief, whatever it might be. And it stems so deep into society. And I think, you know, tribal mentality is probably the best way to put it. Right. And I guess organized religion is a good way to also sort of exemplify that, because there's a belief in something so wholeheartedly that you almost have to go to an extreme to prove it, or prove that your belief in that is validated. That you're willing to, and sometimes kill in the name of a religion, or in the name of a leader, or in the name of a group. And that should never be okay, right? Like,
Yep.
Do things out of love, do things out of respect, do things out of a place of peace and understanding. You're going to come to a lot better middle ground, and a lot better understanding in that mutual respect than if you go into it with hate, or just the stance of having to prove that you're right, even when wholeheartedly wrong.
Yeah, and not to mention, you open yourself up to meeting people that you otherwise would have, completely dismissed. You allow yourself, and I think that's the other thing, is that people don't allow themselves to be wrong, and I think it takes a lot of maturity to be able to have a conversation with somebody and realize, hey, there's a chance I could be wrong, and this person's view can help bridge that gap that I'm missing and change my view on something. Being able to do that takes a lot of self-awareness and love for yourself, but you can't do that if you don't love yourself.
And just imagine if you had that perspective, and I know that they always say hindsight's 20/20, but if you had that perspective now and you confronted your teenage self, how much better you would have been. For me, speaking personally, how much better I would have been, as a teenager and as a citizen of the world at that age, as you're kind of formulating opinions and who you're going to be and what you're going to love, what you're going to stand for. If you could have that look back now, man, it would be so different.
Yeah, if I'm sure there's a time travel device that we don't know about, but yeah, definitely, if there was one, that's something I would. If anything, I would probably just take old podcast episodes and just be like, "Hey, listen to these."
Yeah, check this out. Check out this foresight that we have. But it's part of getting older, right? And I think when we're younger, we never want to become our parents. We never want to become, the parent in the room, or the adult in the room, or that authority figure, or the boss. But there is a certain amount of maturity and responsibility that comes with that, and a lot of life lessons that are learned throughout that process, that you kind of go, shit, I've become my parents in this way. I've become the boss. I've become this adult, whatever it might be. It's not all bad. There's a lot of good things that we can learn now, like being able to let go and like the term sellout, and not having to hold that so near and dear to our heart that if we enjoy a pop song on the radio, we're selling out. It doesn't feel like that anymore. Now I can groove along to that stuff and still know at my core, like, I'm a Slayer fan, I'm a Pantera fan, but I'm going to listen to some Lady Gaga because she kind of rocks too.
Yeah, dude, it's my teen self. If they saw the way I walk to go to the grocery store now, my teen self would shit himself, because he would be like, bro, what, basketball shorts, flip-flops, and a t-shirt? Really? Like,
this is comfortable, man. This is how I rock out now.
I literally, dude, putting on pants is a chore anymore. If I have to go somewhere and I'm like, do I have to put on pants? Yeah. Maybe I'm not going to go.
This is the best part of working from home, because I'm in a colder climate than you are. But I tell you, for almost 12 months now, I have worn a pair of pants maybe 3 or 4 times. And that's when it gets really cold. But I rock the shorts as often as I can. So I'm dreading that moment where I have to go back into the office and actually wear, grown-up clothes again. Man, what a nightmare that is. I was this was a bunch of years ago, but I saw the Mad Caddies, and there was an awesome pit that was going on. This kind of reminded me of it with the flip-flop thing. That, everybody's rocking out, Mad Caddies are going, and then they stop middle of the song, and their lead singer holds up a flip-flop, like one of those shitty flip-flops that you see at like
a gas station, like dollar.
Yes, exactly. $1 and you get yourself a flip-flop. And he's like, who wears a flip-flop to a punk rock show? And at that time, everybody's like, oh yeah, that's nuts. Now I'm like, man, if I can wear my flip-flops anywhere, I'm going to do that, because I don't want to wear socks and shoes. Man, that's lame.
If anything, my wife and my kids get on me because I still rock the Vans, because I don't like tying my shoes. So there are times when I'm lazy. I would say probably 75% of the time, if I'm just going to the convenience store or something, I don't even put socks on. I just throw them on. And my kids and my wife get so mad because they're like, babe, that makes your feet stink. I'm like, I'm about to go take a shower. It'll be fine. Like, that doesn't bother you? I'm like, no, I'm just running in and running out. Like, I'm not trying to live in the store.
Life is a lot different when you're also not trying to attract a mate, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, they say that, marriage kind of changes you or whatever it is. But, if you're not trying to hit the clubs or, meet up with girls on the weekend, you care a lot less about, do I have the right cologne? If I shaved recently, I haven't had a haircut in weeks. My jeans have holes in them, whatever it might be. I forget it, man. You're lucky if I put on a shirt to go out.
Yep. The only thing I still do, and it's just because it's always been a thing for me ever since I was even in high school, is that I do make sure before I leave the house, I wear deodorant and I don't smell like sweaty butt, just because, again, I'm a Magic fan. I played Magic. I did a lot of Magic tournaments. I went to Pokemon tournaments, and whoo, my gosh. And it would always make me laugh because when early in me and my wife's relationship, she would go, I taught her how to play Magic. So she would go with me, and the look on the nerd's face is like, oh, girl. And I'm like, bro, you have no shot. Like, just based on the fact that you don't use deodorant, like, good luck. And it would make me laugh because I would see her, we would play tournaments and she's off on her own and I'm off playing my games, and just watching them try to interact with her was, dare I say, cute, just because I would laugh. And I'm like, dude, like, you're awkward, you're socially awkward, and I feel for you. But bro, like, seeing my wife try to keep a straight face without wincing because of the smell was just hilarious to me.
Yeah, we used to LAN party when I was younger, and I remember this one time I was dating this girl, and I can't remember if this was cell phone era or not. I assume that I probably had a cell phone at this time. It probably would have been high school. And her friends were out, and I was like, oh, you should swing by. We've got this thing going. Definitely not a place where you want females to go. You don't want for them to see you in that kind of environment, covered in Cheeto dust, crushing Mountain Dew,
just
probably
Mountain Dew bottles everywhere.
Oh, it's just a disaster. But at this time I was like, hey, I'm dating a girl. This is cool. She should definitely come. So her and her friends walk in, and we're playing Counter-Strike. That was the game of the day.
Oh, nice.
And all of a sudden, I'm not terrible. I'm doing really well, but that's because everybody in the room is like, who are these girls? And there was a bar that was there. So they jump behind the bar and they're filling up sodas for everybody. And that was just like, that was the highlight for a lot of these people's lives was that particular moment. But I totally know what you mean.
But yeah, man. So I think that's where we'll end it for today. But before we go, I definitely want to give you an opportunity to promote anything that you got going on. I know you're staying busy, and I definitely have my eyes on you and constantly checking your page every day, see what's going on. But for the listeners, what do you got going on?
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on the podcast and being able to talk about my own stuff. That's pretty cool. So the podcast is the big thing. Every podcast I love is dead. We've got a Facebook page. So facebook.com/Epilid, EPILID. We're on Instagram at Every Podcast I Love Is Dead. I am terrible at Instagram. It's like one step away from TikTok for me. I don't know how to use it, but I'll post, hey, we've got a new episode. Of course, you can listen to us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, whatever all the podcast stuff is that it goes on. Sunday evenings, I do Sunday evenings with Nolan on kknhradio.com. That's 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern time. And starting next weekend, I'm actually doing Saturday mornings, so 6 a.m. till 10 a.m.
Nice.
Eastern time.
Now,
trying to keep track of it.
Can people in the U.S. actually listen to that, or is it Canada only?
No, it's actually a radio station out of Florida. So it's internet-based radio, kknhradio.com. You can stream from there, or you can get the KKNH app on your mobile device. It works a lot better because then you can Bluetooth it to a speaker that sounds awesome and crank up the Pantera when I play that.
Awesome, man. Well, it was great having you. And like I said, I know that once my music and stuff goes a little bit further, I'm going to be hitting you up to get back on your podcast. And this is your second home, man. You're always welcome here. I know we have a lot more we can discuss. I just don't want the episode to go a little bit too long. But I definitely
I think you and I could do that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to go for the Joe Rogan 4-hour podcast just yet. Maybe
that'll
eventually.
be a couple down the road. Episode 100, we'll get back. We'll shoot the shit for 4 hours.
Yeah, I want to get to a point where if I ever get successful enough with my endeavor, I definitely want to be able to have it to where if I can afford to fly you to my actual studio, have you come in, and then if you come in person, that's when we do the 3-4 hour podcast. We'll make it
and then we can watch those live stats and just see at each interval when tuners are just checking out or listeners are tuning out of the station.
But again, man, thanks for coming on. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming on.
Me.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll definitely do it again. So for everyone listening, you guys enjoy your Friday. Have a great weekend. And until next time.